In today's litigious society, are you in danger of being sued because you didn't take the proper steps to make sure your business or school was secure? Doc, it is great to see you.
Good to see
We're going to have
you.
some fun today because I love legal stuff. This is going to be interesting because we're going to talk about threat assessment and the legal challenges facing business owners when things happen on their property. Did I get that about right?
Oh yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's one thing we don't talk about too much, really. I mean,
No.
we always talk about, if it could have been stopped and all the, the human, tragedy part of it, which is obviously, that's where the importance of this stuff is. But at the bottom, the end of the day, it still comes down to, liability. It comes down to lawsuits. It comes down to, protecting your business or protecting your school legally. So even though, it sounds kind of cold, but it's a fact, right? It's a real fact, as far as legal liability. And I just thought it might be worth a discussion with you today over some of that, and also to maybe end up with some ideas of how this, threat assessment thing, the prevention piece, is legally really important to do. That really we don't have a choice.
Yeah, we don't think about it. We should because it's on the news all the time. Somebody's suing somebody. And if you're company X, it happens to be a large retail place that has thousands of people coming in and out of your store every day, and you haven't taken proper security measures, and something happens. Well, guess what? The, the ambulance chasing lawyer is seeing dollar signs. The person who got injured is coming after you. Have clients that this happens to all the time, business owners that they'll slip and fall in their store and they end up getting sued because of that. Well, if you get attacked in a store because you didn't have proper security, you're at risk. If you have a large company with warehouse with multiple employees, Amazon, for instance, has all those warehouses with many, many employees there, and you haven't done a proper background check or a threat assessment of your team, and you don't know what you don't know, you're at risk. You're at risk for, maybe you'll win the case, maybe not, but you're definitely going to spend a buttload of money, excuse my language, defending yourself. It's going to take time away from your primary job, and it's going to be a disruption for your leadership team.
That's absolutely correct. Because, really, when we look at this from the standpoint of liability, any sort of an active shooter, active killer event, whatever, it's basically, it falls under, the workplace laws and regulations. A school is a workplace. I mean, certainly the schools, the children go there for education and things like that, but it is a workplace. And so because it's a workplace, whether it's a school or corporation or any sort of a business where, where you have people coming in and you're doing some sort of service or selling things, there is a legal requirement in all 50 states, as well as the federal government, to include laws and regulations, that there is a duty of care to keep your workplace safe, right? That is the bottom line. Now, the question is, what does that mean? Because when you have someone who gets killed in a lobby of a hotel, for example, I've worked some of these cases. These are called premise liability cases. And a premise liability case is based on the fact that if someone gets hurt or killed or injured or whatever the issue is, was it foreseeable? And that's the key legal term. And what that means is that we have a duty to care, all of us, right? But it comes down to the school board and superintendent and the CEO, the insurance company, all those people have a legal requirement to keep it safe. And so we look at foreseeability. And so what does that mean? Well, foreseeability means, is it clear because of negligence, because of something that wasn't done or was done, that because of that, then this problem happened? And so, for example, there is someone who, let's say, dies in a hotel or a theater. Okay, so I had there was a case, right? I had a case that I worked where a woman was stabbed to death in the vestibule of a theater, right? And so she's a patron. She goes to the theater. She goes to the restroom. She comes back, goes into the theater. There was a guy who she did not know. He was there. He legally could be there. He was just in the hallway. Um, Watched her because we watched the video cameras, right? And then as soon as she went into the theater, he followed her in and within seconds stabbed her, almost killed her, and then he left. And that was the case, right? And so cases like that, and we can take it to the school level also, or the company level when you're talking about, let's say, like an active shooter, active killer type event, right? The question is that after it's all done, was it foreseeable? Did you have things in place that were reasonable and necessary to stop it, right? And that's reasonableness is really what the argument is in court, right? The person or the family of the victim, for example, who is suing the organization, the school, for the death of their child, right? They're going to say, well, you were negligent, you didn't take reasonable care, my child died, and so that's the crux of the lawsuit. And then the counter to that is, well, was it foreseeable, and were there reasonable methods or things taken to stop it? Now, there's never 100%, so you can never be 100%. So it's that reasonable piece, and that's kind of where we land on the threat assessment, at least in terms of what I want to chat about today. So let's talk about foreseeability, and let's talk about Parkland. I think Parkland is probably the best example of foreseeability issue. So what do we have in Parkland? Happened in, I think, February of 2018, 17 people killed by a former student who had previously been expelled. Okay, we all know those facts. Okay, now if you look at things that happened up to that point relating to the shooter, okay, just a few things. So one thing that people don't take in consideration that a threat assessment should, and this isn't really necessarily something that stands out, but he was orphaned 3 months before the shooting. Both of his parents who adopted him when he was young died 3 months before the shooting. Years prior to that, there was a report to the police in 2016 that he was going to shoot up the school. There's evidence of social media posts of him with guns, and he is exhibiting extremist views, anti-Muslim views, anti-Black views. Within Broward County, he was transferred between 6 schools over his time as a student for behavioral problems. And then he was expelled in 2017. Remember, 2018 was when the shooting happened. There was also evidence that he engaged in cutting himself. There were mental health problems. There was an argument on whether or not there should be treatment for his mental health issues. And at the end of the day, they weren't addressed. Okay, now there's a lot of other stuff, but let's just look at that as an example. So all of those things are documented. They're things that are that can easily be tracked. So if you were the school or the corporation and you were in charge of being that person who is responsible for foreseeability, right, for making it reasonably safe, if you just look at these 5 points, and there's a lot more, and there's a lot more for other cases too that we could talk about, it's very clear here that there's a foreseeability issue based on these facts. And so when you have the parents or the families of all of the people who were killed or injured come back, it's a pretty easy case to make if you look at all the indicators that were clear. This wasn't just someone making stuff up. These are written down facts, police reports, mental health evaluations, school records, and things like this. So there was no threat assessment process that was in my opinion, reasonable there, because there is clear foreseeability issues. And so this is just an example of why it's really important to look at threat assessment, not just the cameras and the response and the alarms and all the stuff that happens after bang, after the attack. But as superintendents, as CEOs, as business owners, you have a duty to care to do things that are on the mitigation and prevention side. And when you're talking about violence, okay, it has to be behavioral threat assessment. And this is the reason this is starting to become a thing. It's still not a thing enough, in my opinion, but it's not. And so if you look at what are the benefits, what are the legal benefits of behavioral threat assessment? Okay. Well, what it does is it aligns the duty of care to address potential threats. That's number one. It enables schools and workplaces to identify and address potential threats before they escalate to violence. Another reason, point 3 here. The process collects information lawfully and ethically to balance safety concerns with individual rights. That's part of the process. It aligns with best practices, privacy laws, FERPA, HIPAA, ADA. It's structured, it's evidence-based, it's not profiling. It looks at observable behaviors, facts, and patterns. It documents the results or an ongoing threat assessment. Like, so there's a person of concern, a student of concern. It keeps things documented and it archives those so you can stay on top of potential problems that may not at this point escalate, to calling the police, but something that we look at, that we monitor, that we watch. And what it does is it's multidisciplinary. Part of a threat assessment team is multidisciplinary. It's not just going to be the police or the mental health professional or the principal. Part of it has to be at least 3 disciplines. One being an administrator of the school, rather that's the principal, whoever is designated. Number 2, the school counselor or other mental health professional, and number 3, security or law enforcement. And so these are just briefly an example here. You look at Parkland and you look at duty to care and you look at foreseeability. And it doesn't really take much rocket scientists to figure out that there was a lot that should have been done, and it's all fact-based. And so the threat assessment process is absolutely critical as part of the duty of care for school boards, superintendents, CEOs, and business owners.
Well, here's the thing I love about this conversation. It's real simple. There's thousands of schools across the United States that have kids that have issues. Fair? Mm-hmm. In many cases, those issues are compartmentalized because a teacher said something but didn't write anything down. There was a fight that happened in the hall that somebody cleared up before anything happened. The principal talked to somebody, but it wasn't documented. It wasn't consolidated. And there's no real way in a lot of schools to track behavior and challenges with kids in a way that you can see things before they happen, right? You have all this information in a file cabinet someplace, and after the incident, we look at all this stuff that happened, and we go, well, you should have known that was going to happen. You had all this information. Well, if you don't have a threat assessment system and you're not tracking this stuff on a daily basis, you're not going to know what's happening. There's too much going on in a day for one person to see that and consolidate it without a proper process and a team of experts to help you build that model. Whether you're a business, go ahead.
I was going to say, how many? Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And the only thing I can say is, how many times do you look at a shooting that happens, and everyone says, "Oh gosh, well this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened," and no one tracked it, no one connected the dots, and no one even knew the right dots to connect in the first place. That's threat assessment.
Nobody built the map until after the event.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple. So for everyone out there watching today, you need to think about this very, 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 very much. If you don't have something in place where all this information isn't being consolidated and reviewed on a regular basis, i.e. a threat assessment, then you need to figure it out. Because I don't see the world getting less violent in the next 10 years. As a matter, I see more silliness happening because of the way just the way society is today and how quick we are to react, and how kids are dealing with stuff they've never had to deal with before because of social media and everything else. So now is the time to start putting things in place to protect your school, your business, your family, and friends. And if you're not, then just realize there is a legal liability potentially for you and your institution. And you may not like the results if it goes to court.
That's a fact.
Fair enough, Doc?
That's a fact.
All right, Doc. Well, it's great seeing you. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. It's going to be sunny. Please don't rain this weekend. It's rained every weekend for the last 2 months. I just need a weekend without rain. If we could just have that, I'd appreciate it. But to my farmers and ranchers, I know we appreciate the rain and all that. So anyway, with that, this episode of SafeDefend Live, Doc and Dave, we are out of here.
Have a great weekend.